right, hello everyone. My name is Allison Abbott, and I'm a design researcher and strategist based out of Washington, D.C., with an innovation firm called Peer Insight. And so far in this conference, we've heard some really incredible stories about all of the impact that so many of your programs are having on the communities that you're trying to benefit. And the way that I want to structure my session is going to look a little different. I'm actually going to start with a story of a project that almost didn't work and almost didn't have the impact that was intended. Ultimately did, but we'll talk about why. Let's see here. So I want to bring you to 2013, and this is the White River Hospital on the Fort Apache Indian Reservation in Arizona. Now, White River Hospital faced a serious problem. About 25% of ER visitors were leaving without being seen. Like many patients in sparsely populated areas, members of this tribe use the ER for most treatment needs, even if they were non-emergencies, like getting a prescription filled. So on any given day, 2/3 of ER visitors were not seeking crisis treatment. So what ended up happening is these non-emergency visitors consistently got delayed as staff were treating the crisis patients. So they had to wait sometimes up to 6 hours to be seen. So many would just leave without getting treatment. But these non-crisis problems going untreated in the short term usually would manifest as true emergencies just a few days later. And these patients would then have to be helicoptered out to a different hospital at great expense. So a team with the Department of Health and Human Services was faced with performance improvement of this hospital, and they got together to brainstorm ideas of how they could solve this problem. So they came to an idea. What if we put electronic kiosks to improve the ER process and reduce wait times? There was a similar service being used at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, and with great success. Patients would electronically sign in upon arrival, and the system would inform other parts of the hospital, maybe the lab, maybe the pharmacy, of those patients' potential needs. So this is where the story would stop for some teams. They would say, wow, this is exactly what we need, let's build it right now. In fact, one person on this team was quoted as saying, "We knew what we were going to do, and no one was going to change our mind. We had all of this research on it, and there were all these great places like Hopkins doing this." And if they were successful, this project would be implemented at over 400 tribal healthcare facilities in the US. So the team identified a problem, and they identified a solution that everyone was excited about. Now, they could have gone to pilot, they could have funded this project, probably to the tune of a few $1,000,000, built it out, and then seen how it did. Maybe measure the impact after it had already been rolled out and fully invested in. But the team decided to pause at this moment here, and they went through a process of articulating assumptions they were making about this specific solution and the specific population it was supposed to serve. For instance, one assumption was, how would White River patients respond to such a high-tech solution? When asked this question, one of the team members thought of her 87-year-old grandmother, who was a woman that was part of the very tribe being served here, and what her reaction would be to this type of display. She realized that many of the tribe's elders, who were the ER's main visitors, would not be comfortable with this technology. In fact, thinking about it further, they reflected on the fact that some of them didn't read or speak English. So these insights went under the radar because they got excited about ideas that they had got from other research from other populations without involving their beneficiaries in a direct way in the brainstorming process. Had they just moved forward with the idea, they would have spent time and money on a solution that had all the right intentions, but didn't actually hit the nail on the head of solving the problems of the community who needed it. So instead, they took a step back and said to themselves, we've got to think about our solution with the stakeholders even closer in the center of our minds. So they went out and they talked to members of the community to gain a greater understanding for what their day-to-day was like, what their behaviors and attitudes are, how they interact with other technology and other services. They did small tests on a few other solutions, using paper prototypes investing relatively little amounts of money to get great insight as to what services might do well for this population. Ultimately, they landed on a new idea. What if we had a medically qualified person at the ER entrance who could speak any language of the folks coming in to assess each patient's condition and triage them within 15 minutes? They designed and ran a 4-day learning launch to test it out, just to see if they were directionally headed in the right direction, and the results were impressive. The percentage of people leaving without treatment was significantly reduced. Now they felt confident moving on to the next stage and putting dollars towards building out this solution in full. Now, some other compelling parts was that the hospital revenue was greatly increased because sending patients away without being seen, not getting prescriptions filled, having to medevac people out, cost the hospital almost $6 million in revenue, where it only cost $150,000 to implement this new ER structure. So what's even better than saving lives, and what's even better than saving money as well? Since the early success of this pilot, it has inspired even more investment in the community and the hospital. The hospital is currently undergoing a multi-million-dollar reconstruction fund because of the impact of this work. So, did the team just happen to come up on this? Was it just luck? No, they went through a process that railed against the status quo. And to quote what the status quo is like, from one person we talked to, is the standard process is this: put a bunch of experts in a room, have a series of meetings for 6 months where they chart out what needs to happen. Then they write a statement of work, then dollars, typically millions of dollars, are put towards that statement of work, and a contractor comes in and builds it and launches it. And then it turns out that most of these new programs don't work quite like they were supposed to. Now, if this resonates with you, it certainly resonates with me. And what I'd like to talk about next is the process by which the Department of Health and Human Services circumvented this status quo and instead got to a really impactful program for their beneficiaries. They used a method called design thinking. Design thinking starts with understanding what is, developing a deep understanding of the challenge. Now, at this stage, we don't shy away from, but we rather embrace the idea that we might not fully understand the problem up front, and that we need to go out to the people who are using our services to check assumptions that we may have. No matter how long we've been working with them, factors change and things change, and we might have built up biases and assumptions that we need to go out and talk to our beneficiaries for to check. We call this empathy research up front. Empathy, as many of you know, is not the same as sympathy. This is not going out and feeling bad for the beneficiaries of our users. This is going out and putting ourselves in their shoes so that they can help inspire design for what projects we might move forward that would really impact their lives. After we've built this empathy and gone out and done our research, we then go into brainstorming potential solutions inspired by that perspective. We then test low-fidelity prototypes with some initial ideas because we know that we can expect to be wrong sometimes in big ways or in small ways, and we want to be able to test that out in a relatively low investment way early on. And then we understand what will work, and we know that what we can end up scaling does meet compelling needs of the community, and it does have the largest possible impact that we're hoping for. Now, when people hear about this process and the research that has to go into design thinking before even getting started on building out a project, they think this, which subtext is this: time, money, resources that we don't have. But this is the important part, and the part that feels so empowering. Going out into the world and solving problems with this design thinking mindset is not something that necessarily requires an outsized budget or a new team. In fact, it's designed to save money in the long run and can be done with your existing teams. This is something we call the risk investment curve, and it's the core of what my firm Pure Insight helps organizations navigate, showing how you can use low investment research early on at the riskiest stage of a project when you have the least evidence as to whether your project is going to be impactful. And as you do more research and gain more confidence, you can invest a bit more, de-risking the project all the while. So while it's easy to think about design thinking and the research that goes into it as scientists in lab coats, I instead think it looks a little more like this, or this, or maybe this. It's about moving the decision-making conversations you're already having that is happening in boardrooms, and instead moving that out into the field, working with the people who will benefit from your work. Instead of going from an idea decided in a conference room and investing a full budget against it, and then taking the lessons learned after to understand if you've had impact, it's about gaining confidence that you are going to have impact before you've invested a huge budget, time, or resources against it. I hope that this human-centered design and user research can inspire some of the ways that you launch projects and decide which projects to move forward with. I would love to talk to you if you have any ideas or want to talk more afterwards. And thank you so much for your time.